Thank you, Bradley. That was Nimrod from the Enigma Variations by Edward Elgar. Nimrod, that's an interesting name. Do you have any idea of its origin?
Yes, so Nimrod was a biblical figure, actually the great-grandson of Noah. And Nimrod's fame was that he was a mighty hunter, strong in the Lord. The connection then with Elgar is that in Elgar's Enigma Variations, he dedicated each variation to one of his friends or colleagues. And part of the enigma, part of the puzzle, was figuring out to which person each one was dedicated. So here's the story with Nimrod. Nimrod was a mighty hunter in the Bible. The word hunter in German is Jäger, and Elgar's publisher friend was named Jäger. So Nimrod from the Enigma Variations is dedicated as an act of gratitude to his publisher.
Interesting. Yes. And there were 14 of those variations, I believe.
That's right.
Those variations were written originally for orchestra, and you're playing it today for us on the organ, as opposed to the Bach that we did in episode 1 that was written for the organ and was ultimately orchestrated. So we want to talk today a little bit about how you use the organ in this transcription to create the same effects that an orchestra can do when playing this piece.
Sure. So the organ has lots of stops. Each stop controls a different sound, so I can hold one note. Holding one note, pulling different stops gives us lots of different sounds, much like different members of the orchestra, different instruments, flutes, strings, reeds, all different parts that make up the whole. The wonderful thing about playing transcriptions, orchestral transcriptions on the organ, is that we have some of those imitative sounds, like a clarinet and an English horn and an oboe, flutes, various string colors, like violins, violas, cellos, and basses. And the great fun of playing transcriptions on the organ is that we can orchestrate them using those colors to imitate great families of tone in the orchestra. So one of the ways that we do this is by using these pistons, which are preset. I can set these with various combinations of sound. And those are very helpful for making very quick, rapid changes in the middle of a piece. Here's one particular spot in the Nimrod where I go from one kind of full color to a little echo effect played softly by the strings of the orchestra, in this case, the strings of the organ, and then a fuller sound, changing each of those families of sound in quick succession.
So in effect, as an orchestra would, some of the players are playing some of the time and others are adding in at various times to create moments that are louder and softer, different timbres and textures.
Exactly.
When a trumpet player adds into the orchestration, he does not necessarily come in playing the loudest he can.
That's correct.
We have a skill, an ability on the organ to create coming in softly and crescendoing as we play. Could you show us how that works?
Certainly. So we have these swell pedals down here that operate shutters, giant kind of Venetian blinds that open on the front of a giant wooden box that contains pipes. On this organ, the choir division and the swell division are both enclosed, meaning that all of the pipes of all of the stops that play on those two manuals are enclosed in a giant six-sided wooden box with thick walls to hold the sound in. But on one side of that box, there are shutters that will open to let sound out and make it louder when I open this pedal, or close to hold the sound in to make it softer. So one of the things that I employ in this piece, having two enclosed divisions, is that I can open one box and then add stops that are in the division with the box closed, and then open that box to let that sound out, and then close the other one, add more stops, so that you can create a more even crescendo.
So show us how you do that. It's certainly a feat to not get your feet tied in knots because you are using both feet, sometimes on the crescendo pedals and sometimes on the notes themselves. And depending on which foot is available at that particular moment, that's the one you're using.
Exactly.
Show us an example of that.
So here's one spot where I start on the swell manual with all the boxes closed. I gradually open the swell, then move down to the choir manual, then open the choir box, close the swell, add some stops, and bring those into play. So here's what that looks and sounds like.
Wonderful. And all of those techniques are used to create feelings and passion and even spirituality in a sanctuary setting like this. We have those discussions around Preston Hollow all the time, and we'd like to invite Matthew Ruffner, our senior pastor, in to just visit with us a little bit about how the music can sometimes take the place of text or have more power than the text to convey what we're thinking spiritually.
Yeah, I want to thank you guys so much for inviting me to join you in this conversation. I have to tell you, I have been absolutely blown away by the content so far, and want to thank you for your expertise. So what I find really interesting about this piece is this was not written for a sacred space, was it?
True. No, that's correct.
What was it written for?
For an orchestra in a concert setting.
Right, and so why do we play it all the time in sacred spaces, like at memorial services or even in worship spaces then, is a question I have.
That's a question we discuss around here a lot. Yeah. We've had lots of great discussions about it. And I'm happy to say that Bradley and you and I are all on the same page about this. Why don't you tell them some of our discussions that we've had, Matthew?
Yeah, so I always find it interesting when we try to break down the difference between the sacred and the ordinary, because I don't think that there is a difference. I think personally and theologically, everything is sacred, everything is holy. And so it's really difficult to say, well, this is secular and this is sacred. I think this is a piece that in many respects breaks down that wall naturally. I think anyone who comes into a space, and Bradley, if they were just sitting in the pew and they heard you play this, I think that they would be at a loss for words at the end of hearing that final note. And they would just, something deep within them would want to say, just sit here for a second, no one say anything.
Well, and sometimes music speaks to us in a way that words are not capable. I think we were visiting with Bradley about some theological classes he had in college. You want to share with us what you told us earlier?
Yes, so, You know, at first I wasn't going to mention this on the video because I thought it sounds a little bit too nerdy, but then I thought, well, we're doing a series on organ music, so we're already there. So I took a philosophy of religion class when I was in graduate school at Yale, and the great modern theologian Nicholas Walterstorff was taking us through different great religious philosophers through time. And Dr. Walterstorff himself was a great lover of classical music. And when we came to the philosopher Schleiermacher, who had certain views about what is God, who is God, and how our experience here on earth sometimes gives us glimpses, feelings, something, that sense that there's something that lies just beyond the veil, but it's very, very close. And Schleiermacher called that the numinous, that there's something I can't quite put my finger on, but there's something incredibly special and eternal about this. Dr. Walterstorff said for him, it was the piano music of Chopin, that for him, there was something just so indescribably emotionally moving and beautiful about that, that to him, that was a vehicle, that beauty in sound was the thing that made him feel that God was very, very close, that numinous, that there's something there. And I think that's in some ways the best description of why certain pieces that were never intended for church yet have a sacred feeling or inspire a sacred feeling. And there are many examples of this. The Vidor Toccata that we've played, it's now played most often in church, less so in concerts. The Barber Adagio for strings, which was originally a string piece and has been adapted so that a lot of times we hear that played by the organ in church. I think all sorts of pieces like that take on a different meaning and a different import. And though they were not originally intended for worshiping God, yet we use them in that way.
Why? Can I ask you folks this? Why is it that we hold music to such standards that it has to be played in a certain way, or it has to come from a particular genre for it to be classified as sacred, when I think we all agree that a moment or a particular place in our lives, because of the people who are there or the experience we are having emotionally or spiritually, can be transformed into something holy. For instance, when we were choir tour this past summer, Scotland, England, the folks out on Iona, pilgrims to Iona have long called Iona a thin place, a place where it is hard to discern between heaven and earth. So why is it when we get to music, we want to say it is all one thing or is all another? Why can't we allow music in the spirit of God, the divine flow, the bass note of the divine in all of creation to shine through music, no matter how it was written or intended? Why is that?
Well, I can tell you, you've got kindred spirits in asking that question with Bradley and me both. We both think that music just is such a gift from God that has a power to speak in a way that words don't. I think just in kind of concluding our time here with this Nimrod, Matthew and I have had some conversations about what this particular organ piece has meant to you in a sacred space. Would you share that just a little bit?
It's Steve, and I'm sure you two feel this way, but it is impossible. Like when you were warming up and I walked in this morning, just hearing these notes takes me back to being with families and thinking about memorial services. This piece I hear most often at the beginning of memorial services, and I walked in this morning and I immediately went back to Sandra Mackey's memorial service in Atlanta and at Trinity Church. I think of Blair Money. I think of Rosemary Curtis. I think of the great cloud of witnesses that have gone before us, and I think about this piece And it articulates a faith beyond words for me. And it moves me every time I hear it. And I am that person sitting out in the congregation when you hit that final note that I just want to go, don't mess it up. Don't say a word to anyone. We just need to sit in this. And so for me, I'm so grateful that you played this today. I'm so grateful that we have dug into what this is. And I can't thank you all enough for letting me jump into the conversation. It's been a real gift.
Well, and I thanked Bradley last week for his contribution to this and still feel the same way. But Bradley and I both want you to know that your support and enthusiasm for music and the role it can play in ministry is invaluable to us, and we treasure you for it. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you. And guys, you know how I feel. I love you both, and we're all on the same team. So,
Amen.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you for joining us on this episode of the Preston Hollow Sessions.
It's truly our joy to explore the power of the gift of music with you, and we hope you'll be with us at our next episode.